Yes.
Yes, is Kathy going to be able to, Alder LaFave, she going to be able to hear?
Yes.
With the start speaker?
Yes,
Okay.
so that was, what happened, everyone, at council, is that when we had computer connecting point in, we were actually trying to get some things going, and that muting that I had done, and where everyone could not hear, that is no longer the case. So if you're muted, you should be able to hear.
All right.
Okay?
All right, very good.
All right.
So we
All
are
right,
set.
should I
Yes.
call?
You're good to go? Yes, go ahead, Alder.
All right. All right, this is the Personnel Committee meeting for the City of Green Bay, mostly via Zoom. I've heard the Chief of Staff, Jeffries, announce that everyone from the committee is here and present, and so we will start this meeting. I'm looking for an approval of the agenda.
Alder Dorf, this is Alder Dorf, I move to approve the agenda. Alder Dax, second.
All right, I have a motion to approve, and I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, and that passes unanimously. I'm looking for an approval of the minutes from our last meeting on February 25th, 2020.
Alder Dax, Alder Dax, second.
All right, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Alder
That
Galvin,
passes itself.
so sorry,
Yeah.
Alder Galvin, could you just clarify who moved it and who seconded it?
It sounded like Dorf made a motion, and it was, I'm sorry?
Alder LaFave moved it.
Okay, Alder LaFave moved it, and I think it was seconded by Alder Corpus Dax.
Correct.
All right. All right, and are we all caught up there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, on the regular business, the first item is consideration with possible action on the request to fill the following replacement positions and all subsequent vacancies resulting from internal transfers. Item A is records clerk for the police department. Item B is a building and maintenance technicians for public works. And item administrative clerk for public works. Staff.
So we do have the request to fill included in your packet. If you have any questions, you can answer those. Otherwise, you can, we recommend to approve.
All right, I have no questions. Alder Dorf, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Alder LaFave, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
And Alder Corpus Dax, do you have any questions?
I do not.
All right, I will entertain a motion.
Motion by Alder Dorf, second by Alder Dax. By Alder LaFave.
Okay, I'm going to give this motion to Alder Dorf and the second to Alder Corpus Dax. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that sounds like it passed unanimously. Item number 2, consideration with possible action, the request by Alder Johnson to draft a resolution requesting the state to suspend rules on utilization of the unemployment insurance fund to allow employers and or governments to access the funds in tandem with matching subsidy payments to fully compensated employees affected by coronavirus who are temporarily and or partially displaced. Now, Alder Johnson is not able to make it. He has another meeting that's taking place at the same time. He did contact me and give me his thoughts on why he made this motion. Does staff have anything to say or add to this?
This is Joe Falls, HR Director. So no, I don't have anything to add to that. Well, I guess what I do or will add is we are able to work with Alder Johnson and to create a resolution that could be passed at the next common council meeting. So just to keep that in mind, that if you do direct staff to work on it, we can have it ready for the next common council meeting.
All right, and just for the other 3 alders that are present here, basically small businesses are required to put money into a fund, call it an insurance fund if you want, that if an employee is laid off or the job ceases to exist, they can get unemployment compensation. That compensation, like especially with the city of Green Bay, if we are compensating employees like we did, we set up in our emergency meeting last week, to compensate employees who are unable to work due to the coronavirus for several reasons that are listed in the declaration. If we were able to get the state to free up those funds, it would allow us to compensate those employees at 100% without all the money coming out of our coffers. But there would need to be some legislation, not just to free it up, but also, as Alder Johnson explained to me, if we were to try and compensate them, they might using the fund, the unemployment compensation fund, some of that might be reduced by the state. So what we're looking for in a resolution is for the funds to be released and for us to use the monies so that they can be compensated at 100%, using a combination of city funds and the state and unemployment compensation funds.
I have a question, Alder Galvin.
Sure.
This is Alder Dorf. Are we jumping the gun by doing this at all? Will there be some federal legislation coming out?
Sure.
Help me understand this. I don't know why.
Right. He understands there could be some federal funds coming this way. There may be some state funds. But in the meantime, he felt it was best to get this resolution sent to the legislature so they can start action on it. And if we don't need it, good.
Okay.
But if the feds fall through, if the state falls through on other avenues we're looking at, then we're best served if we pursue it and don't need it, than not to pursue it and then need it, and then it takes longer to get those funds released.
With that, then I would like to make a motion to refer to staff, but you can continue discussion if you want to.
All right. Alder Corpus Vance, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't. I mean, it makes sense to have it. Hopefully we don't need it, but if we do need it, then at least we have it started.
Okay, thank you. And Alder LaFave, do you have any questions or comments?
I did, but I think Elder Dorf brought it up, what I was considering. I was wondering too, if the states, if this would be allowed to the states and, you know, the regulations and everything. So I think that was all answered, and I definitely feel that this is important, that we do this for our employees.
All right, so I have a motion from Alder Dorf to send to staff to put together a resolution. I need a second.
I'll second.
Alder LaFave. I have a second from Alder LaFave. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that sounds like it passed unanimously. Under informational, we have building maintenance technician emergency authorization to hire.
Nope.
Yeah,
So we still have 8, or number 3?
Yes.
Number
Oh,
three.
I'm sorry. I apologize. All right, number 3, consideration with possible action, the request by Alder Dorf to the Finance and Personnel Committee by fire and what other departments may be appropriate regarding our current city pandemic plan in terms of potentially needed finances and personnel especially, but not limited to protecting our first responders from contamination. Alder Dorf?
Well, yeah, I'd just like to turn this over to Director Falls, because he sent us some really good information. He updated on the information that we got at council. So, Director Falls, will you please talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, I can do that. This is Director Falls here. So the plan was sent out to all last week, and then it was approved, the emergency declaration was approved last week at a special common council meeting, and then this plan is to coincide and be consistent with that. So the plan, the purpose of it is to minimize the impact of COVID-19 on the employees and the public. And last week we went into detail, and Chief Litton went into detail on the background of the coronavirus and also the symptoms of it. And then we talked about what our staff is doing to disinfect our workplace and to make it safer for our employees. And then also some of the steps we are taking is to limit the direct contact that we have with our employees and the public. And we've also suspended most, if not all, in-person meetings. And then we are excluding some employees from employment based on travel or based on having symptoms similar to COVID-19. And then we've also implemented a telecommuting policy to allow our employees to work from home. And then the last thing is we've been looking at essential and non-essential functions and what employees need to be working and what services are being cut that could affect some of our employees' services. And obviously, a determination from the state will be coming down tomorrow, which will affect that as well. So going through, I've already touched on how our meetings have been more over the phone or over email, and also these committee and common council meetings are through Zoom or any other video conferencing that we can do. So what I sent to the committee yesterday, and what it was is the same plan, but I highlighted some of the changes that were different from last week. So I'm going to touch on those. So the first one is with the exclusion from employment and return to work. That's where the CDC and the Department of Health Services has changed when someone can come back who is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or maybe symptoms similar to it. So if someone is excluded from employment because they were experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, they can come back if they have a COVID-19 test that demonstrates a negative result, or if 3 days have passed since recovery, which means that their fever has gone away or that they're not experiencing respiratory issues, and at least 7 days have passed from the first experience of symptoms. And then also there can be documentation from a provider saying you can return to work. And then also we have it updated to the travel and return to work policy. So at this point, Brown County has community spread of COVID-19. So the rationale for the travel policy can seem somewhat out of place, because right now you could go to the grocery store and get COVID-19. So how do we put a policy together that excludes people who travel from work? So what we did was, we're still looking at people who have traveled, let's say the past couple of weeks, who used a plane or public transportation. The risk seems more likely of exposure to COVID-19 if you're in those public transportation areas. So we are still going to follow the CDC recommendations to quarantine someone for 14 days. And then going forward, if someone continues to travel, they will also be quarantined for 14 days. Where the exception is coming, though, is the Department of Health Services has allowed for either police officers or fire departments or first responders to allow their employees to be quarantined for less time if there is an issue with their staffing. So that's what we gave the authority for our police and fire department to implement that if they need to. And then I think the last piece of it is, it's unclear at this point if someone travels on their own for personal travel, if they'll be allowed to use paid sick leave through the federal legislation, or will have to use their own sick leave through the city. So that's still up in the air that we're working on, and we'll have more information when we know more about the new federal legislation, which is called the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, gets put into effect. The last piece of it was the leave benefits and payroll considerations. This was based on our state of emergency declaration from last week, and it's to be consistent with that. So what this allows for is any employee who's been diagnosed with COVID-19 or is caring for a family member who's been diagnosed with COVID-19, or is caring for a child who may be home due to a school closing, or childcare is closed due to COVID-19, or is excluded from employment, or is advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns over COVID-19, those individuals will continue to receive paid sick leave. The second piece of it is, if we have any services that are cut, we will continue to allow the individual to receive full pay and benefits based upon there not being any available work. What I can let the committee know at this time is we have very few employees that are in that boat. Most of our employees are either working from home or do have 40 hours of work. And one thing that happened today was some of the employees who have less than 40 hours of work, our clerk's department needed some help with elections, and many of them were able to come in and fill their day, fill the hours of work by helping out the clerk's department. So even though we may have some employees who may have less work, we are able to find different work for them for different departments, or they're able to work from home. So it's not a lot of people are affected by this, but in case maybe the state order tomorrow changes that, it might allow us to have that leeway to give our employees full pay and benefits. So that's the emergency preparedness plan that we put together. I know it doesn't really touch upon a lot of the operational plans, specifically for probably the most important departments, fire and police, and with their operations are DPW, but that's for more of the general guidelines for our employees.
So, along those lines, this is Alderdorf, operationally, with fire and police, and perhaps even with DPW, are we checking the temperatures of people when they come to work so that we don't inadvertently spread it to like other first responders? And should that be part of this policy?
Alderdorf from the police department. We've ordered the thermometers where you just basically point it at your forehead and it tells you the temperature. We have not taken shipment of those, but they should be here at the PD by the 25th. However, the school district was graciously enough to give us their thermometers from their health department, so we have 2 points of entry within the police department, and we have thermometers at the door. We have it optional, so people can optionally take their thermometer, their temperature, and a lot of people are taking it. The reason we haven't made it mandatory yet is because people are, these thermometers are the ones that you put the prong underneath your tongue and then you take your temperature. We didn't want people to think that they're spreading germ from one person to the next. However, once we do take shipment of those other thermometers, hopefully this week, Wednesday by the latest, it will become mandatory for us.
And that was Kevin Ward from the fire department, from the police department.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, that was Kevin Warwick from the police department.
For our studio audience.
Yes, for our studio audience.
And I know Chief Litton, you're going to want to jump in here, but this is Joe Falls. I'm going to just add one quick thing. I want to make sure that HR has a chance to review whether or not we should make it mandatory and maybe the legal ramifications for doing that for our employees. I think that's something we need to review and at least see what we can use the temperature for, and I guess what our risk is with that.
Well, Dr. Falls, if they're using the type of thermometers that are completely non-invasive, why wouldn't we require it? There wouldn't be a risk then, would there?
So Alderdorf.
This is Chief
This is
Litton.
Alderdorf, sorry, this is Alderdorf.
This is Chief Litton from the fire department. So there is some concern about a mandatory order in relation to the Health and Information Protection, Privacy Protection Act, otherwise known as HIPAA, that we can't mandatorily tell the employees that they have to take their temperature, though we can have the equipment there available for them to voluntarily do so, and then, if they get a temperature that falls within the parameters, they can self-report, and then they can be sent home nonetheless.
Chief, does the fire department have the thermometers yet? This is Alderdorf.
We do not, it's all part of the same order.
Okay.
We're not expecting shipment. The last word we got was we've got the ones that we have on our ambulances, and those have to stay on the ambulances, obviously. The order that we placed, the last word we got, receiving somewhere after April 1st. So that's the latest information I have, which is almost a couple of weeks away.
This is Alder LaFave. So what you're saying then is that once you get these temperature ones where you can just read from the forehead, then that would almost become mandatory before they can come into work?
No, that's not.
No?
That's not what I understood. Did you
Hey,
just say?
folks, this is Alder Gelman. Because we can't see each other when someone else will talk, let's try and let each alder or each representative from staff talk, and when they're done, they can just announce, I'm done with my questions or my comments, and then someone else can jump in. So I think Alder Dorf still had the floor, and if she wants to continue, she may.
Okay, so my understanding from what I heard from Chief Litton is that because of HIPAA, we may not be able to require them to have their temperature taken. Is that accurate?
This is Chief Litton in the fire department. That is an accurate statement.
Okay, thank you. This is Alder LaFave. Can I speak now?
Alder Dorf, are you done?
Yeah, Alder Dorf, is finished right now. Thank you, Alder.
All right, Alder LaFave, go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering then, can we make a request to the state? Can the state make a mandatory order that they have to have their temperature taken?
Staff?
Again, the HIPAA law is a federal law. It has not been waived. I don't believe that it will be waived. There are some provisions in there for various things that we can't disclose as far as healthcare providers in a pandemic or in an emergency, but mandatorily ordering employees to take the test is not one of those exceptions.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
All right, Alder Corpus Dax, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not. I'm fine at this time.
All right, thank you. This would be for, I think, for Jill. I have a question about travel. In as much as we've been requested to shelter in place, I would imagine when employees are off duty, we would hope that they're sheltering in place. If we have employees, though, that willingly choose to travel via air or other public transport to vacation sites or things like that, and they return, and they're either found to be infected with the virus, or even if they have to go in the quarantine phase, I'm wondering how the city is going to look on that and how they're going to treat that.
Yeah, this is Joe Falls. Yeah, that's a very good question. We've been looking at more and more information about how to treat that. I think common sense would say that, based upon what we know about the exposure of COVID-19 and the risk that poses to the individual and the employees and the public if they travel and then come back, I think common sense would say we would prefer that they use their own sick leave, but we just want to make sure that we're legally okay to ask them to do that based upon the new legislation that just went through. So I think right now we're going to look into it more, but we will be asking if legally we can ask people to use their own sick leave, we will do that.
All right, yeah, I would prefer that. And obviously, 99% of employees are good people. They want to follow the rules. They want to do the right thing. But we always end up with these situations that we didn't anticipate or didn't think that someone would think about doing this. And I just think to be fair to all the other employees that are trying to follow the rules, and that we do our due diligence and just make sure we understand the ins and outs of these rules and the ramifications that go with it.
Go ahead.
Alder Corpus Dax. So is that what, that effective 17/2020, is that what Alder Galvin is talking about, where it says if an employee will be asked to self-quarantine for up to 14 days, that employee may not be eligible for paid sick leave?
Yes,
Under,
Joe. Oh.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so Alder Corpus Dax, this is Joe Falls here. So yeah, the section that you pointed to, that is correct. And just one thing I want to add real quickly, I think Alder Dorf asked about adding like the thermometers to this plan. And one thing is, I look at the emergency declaration as giving us the authority to have this plan. This has to be consistent with that, but we also want to be consistent with any federal, state, local laws. So this piece is more of a communication piece to our employees and the public. If we have to adapt and change, we're going to follow the laws no matter what. So even if it doesn't get into that policy or this plan, we're still going to follow the laws, and it might not be up to date with the current plan that we have, but we're going to try to update as soon as we can.
Okay.
Okay, I appreciate that, Joe. And I know this whole thing is so fluid. You guys are really taking on a lot of extra work other than your everyday stuff to try and keep everyone up to date and aware and apprised of what's going on. So, and I mean, you look at what happened when we had 14 fire employees that, unbeknownst to them, they got caught up in this thing and had to be quarantined. We had 5 police officers that had to be quarantined. And this can really affect an organization, especially if you have other employees that can't come in contact with people because of pre-existing conditions. And so I think we have to be very careful to protect our employees, but also to have enough employees available to do the job that is expected of them. So thank you very much.
Is there any motion that you would like, Mr. Chair? This is Alder Dorf.
Yes, I guess I would ask Joe if there's a motion he thinks that should be made with this, or just with a receive and place on file suffice.
I think a motion to approve, I think, would be okay.
A motion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move to approve. This is Alder Dorf.
All right.
Alder Deck, second.
All right, I have a motion to approve by Alder Dorf, second by Alder Corpus Dax. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move on to letter F, informational. The first one is building maintenance technician emergency authorization to hire. Staff?
So this is Joe Falls. So I know with informational items, we can take them all together. So I might just talk about them all at once, if that's all right with you, Chair.
All right. Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, sir.
So we have the emergency authorization to hire for the BMTs, and then I'm trying to find the second one. Oh, it's to the recruit for the senior animal keeper. So the emergency authorization to hire, we had some BMTs that resigned, and we needed to fill those positions for maintenance and security purposes as soon as we could, because we had, I think, a couple weeks until our next personnel committee meeting. So the chair of personnel and Mayor Genrick approved that emergency authorization. So that's why we went ahead and filled those positions before it went to the committee. That's why we have this informational item here. And then with the senior animal keeper, that is a position that was approved through the budget, and that's informational that we are starting to recruit. I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about how going forward, obviously not anytime soon because we have more pressing things to deal with, but I think for efficiency purposes, the city might be asking for the Common Council to allow positions that have been approved through the budget to be approved at the staff level, so we don't have to come back for the authorization from personnel. But any reclassification or any elimination of a position or adding of a position, we would then come back to personnel. And there are several communities that already do this, and this would help, I think, with efficiency purposes, and where we needed that emergency hire, we wouldn't have to go that route.
Okay, I guess, so what you're saying is that if we need to hire someone, you don't have to go through the process of going to the personnel committee, you want to be able to go to the chair and or the mayor, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying, and this is all informational, we have to do a little bit more research on this. Sorry, this is Joe Falls, and we have to do more information on it, or get more information, but what we're asking for is, when the Common Council approves positions during the budget process, that you then allow the staff level for those positions to be hired or refilled as they become open throughout the year, instead of going through the emergency authorization process. And there are several communities that already do this. And I guess the thought is, the Common Council just approved these positions this past December. Not a whole lot has changed in the next couple of months. Why do we need to go back to personnel and ask for that authorization? But we do feel that the Personnel Committee does need to weigh in on reclassification, restructuring of departments, eliminating positions or adding positions. But I'm just giving you guys a heads up that I think this will be an item that we might bring in down the road.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I mean, why spend time on something that the council's already approved? Why make them go through committee and council all over again? It's a system that's just, I guess, going to delay the process when we need these people in place a lot sooner. So that's something I would urge you to pursue that.
And then with
Okay, and does anyone have any, no, go ahead, Joe.
I was just saying, then we have the report of routine personnel actions. If you guys have any questions on that, and if you have any questions too about what I just went through, you can always give me a call or talk to me about it on a later date.
Okay. Does Alder Dorf, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not.
Alder Corpus Dax?
What was the question?
Alder Corpus Dax, do you have any questions or comments on what Joe just talked about, the building munition authorization to hire recruitment for the CN, report of routine personnel actions?
No, no.
All right, thank you.
I will have
And
questions
Alder-
later, but no, not right now.
All right, and Alder LaFave?
No, I do not.
All right. Then I think this is just, we're looking for a motion to receive and place on file.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Alder LaFave?
All right, I got a motion by Alder Corpus Dax, and I think I have a second by Alder Dorf. All those in favor?
I'm sorry, it was actually Alder LaFave. I see that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and then a second by Alder LaFave. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so our next meeting is tentatively set for April 7th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Alder Dorf.
Second,
Sorry.
Alder Corpus Dax.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, then, for Celestine, now, do we
Yes.
all hang up the phone and
Yes.
log off and then, all right, very
Yes.
good.